I was going to say one clap for Mr. Suleiman. Well, thank you, Elia, for being here with us. I hope you drank a lot to remember.
In fact, I have to tell you that I hate you all because I was having the most amazing Porto in the world. And then Paolo told me you have to go, and I hated him too.
And you left the Porto there?
No, I drank it.
Okay.
But I could have drank the whole bottle. It was really a Porto of 1985, so it's not bad. Yeah. Which means I can answer your questions anytime. But, yeah.
Well, are you a stranger, a perfect stranger, as they say in the film?
Oh, no. Hold on.
Well,
you don't want to sleep?
Or was it your no? So you lived in New York. You live in Paris.
Yeah.
Is that why you decided to make this kind of travel all over the world? But this is a non-realistic film. But so non-realistic is more realistic.
Well. I mean, the idea of the film, you won't believe it, but it came long time ago. And I had this sensation that I want to do a film that is maybe following my nomadic existence. I've lived in so many places in the world. And I thought I would like to do a kind of sponge the ambience of every place and make a film out of that. But this is many years ago. Meanwhile, the world started to go in a state of rather regression, and my sense of alienation started to grow. I thought I could become the perfect stranger because every time I lived in a place, I felt at home, and I felt this is how humans should feel. They should identify with every place that they live in, and that they should feel at home in every home wherever they are. But then something rather perverse happened, which is that every place that I lived started to look exactly the same. And I was no longer living the diversity that I thought I would live. I was just living every place similarly, because every place started to have similar situation like my homeland. Every place had tension, and every place had a state of exception, every place had emergency situations and sirens and checkpoints, and so in fact I did not travel any place. I just seemed to have lived in the same place all over. I don't know, just go to the airport and you see what I mean. I mean, it's like you become a slave to the system. You have to take off your clothes and do like this and obey orders and feel traumatized and grow in anxiety, and so then I decided that it's not only about my nomadic existence, but it's also about the state of the world, and it's about the globalization, and it's about the global violence, and it's about the state of exception, and it's about the police state, and it's about dictatorships everywhere we go. So it grew in terms of what I wanted to say. So this film is really about, the globe under occupation, if you want me to say it in brief terms. So this is why I decided to go ahead and make this film. It's because I feel like maybe the sense of alienation that has been growing interiorly inside of me, the sense of loneliness that has been growing inside of me, that I felt somehow that it's something that I'm not the only one who feels that way, that there are a lot of people in the world who feel that way. And at the same time I felt that you know, we seem to always look at the exterior world and we look, okay, there are fires and there are wars and there are this and there's that and the ice is melting and I don't know what. But nobody's really sharing the most intimate, which is the interior self of us waking up with a slight fear in our soul and of a sense of displacement. And it started to occur to me that in fact it's not about displacement, geographic displacement, it's also about a homelessness even when we do have a home. It starts to become like we are rootless even in our own homeland. So there is a sense that grew on me that I'm not the only one who's feeling this sense of nomadic existence, that in fact it seems to be something I'm feeling, I'm sponging everywhere else. So this is really the reason I wanted to make the film. Now, having said that, I had no intention at all to speak analytically about any of this. It all starts simply with an image. It starts from an intuition and it starts from a desire. And the most essential desire I have is how to make the image cinematic and how to make it pleasurable. For me, the essence of it is pleasure. When you leave here, you can think as much as you want, analyze as much as you want, but the fact is, I make it only to initially produce the pleasure of laughter and the pleasure of the burlesque and the pleasure of the image and the choreography and the laughter and the somehow, if my ambition is to create a poetic moment or to ignite a desire, so that if the people, the spectators leave the theater, it's not necessarily that they're going to speak about their own alienation or something related to the film. It could be also that they go to have a good meal and they have a good porto, like I did just now, and maybe, you know, ignite some kind of desire. Hopefully it's for maybe, let's say, making friends or have a tender moment. I'm not going to talk about potentially having sex, but just the same. But the consequence of why I want to make a film is because I just want to create a tender momentum, something that would enhance or ignite some hope, possibly, and a sense of consolation, because things are going really bad everywhere, and I think it would be nice to just have this kind of intimacy, you know, with our friends, with our intimate ones. And so initially it's about the self, it's not about mobilization. Mobilization there is. The people at the end of the film, they are amazing people. They are anarchists and they are pacifists and they are the young generation and they are the ones who are really gave me hope when I saw them, when I encountered them. And I think there is something quite organic in the way they identify with everybody around the world, with the causes of everywhere in the world. So I think they are the perfect strangers and not me. Well, I enjoyed watching them, I identify with them, but I think they probably got it more natural than all my conceptual nonsense that I've tried all my life.
But you start the film with a religious ceremony that is kind of weird because of what happens in that procession, Orthodox procession, and you end the film with these people having a party and singing, and that you're optimistic about. After all, you're optimistic about.
Of course I am. I mean, I don't know, maybe. Okay, first of all, the beginning of the film is not at all metaphoric. I just love to start my films with a B-movie kind of thing, you know. It's not metaphor, it's just because I like the gag. And I did that in Divine Intervention, you know, Santa Claus was stabbed and all of that. I loved Santa Claus being stabbed. I hated Santa Claus all my life. In my town, in Nazareth, you know, it was kind of lower middle class, so Santa Claus, when he went around, he threw this bonbon, and it always made you go to the dentist. It was so disgustingly sweet. So I hated Santa Claus. I couldn't stand. Thank God, when I was young, nobody appeared at the door. You know, if it appeared, I would have stabbed it. But I like to start my films with something that nourishes lightness, légèreté. You know, so that the audience releases muscles. You know, not to start like. You know, me, when I watch a film on TV, me, if I see a snake on the television, I shut the television. I cannot stand snakes, you know, and I hate tension, and I cannot. Yeah, except that's that. So it's not about religion at all. It's really just about having a little moment of initiating the film in a lighter fashion. But the people at the end, it so happened that, talk about hope, when I shot the film, there was no scene at the end. And I was really a bit kind of desperate. And I went to Nazareth, and Nazareth was really empty. It's become even much worse than it used to be. Like something what was shocking to me. So I thought I would end with the Bedouin woman, you know, that would be maybe a kind of sign of hope that she's still working, she's still coming back. There's something quite very Palestinian about this scenery. And then I asked people, I said, but where are the young people in Nazareth? It's terrible. It's like there's only violence and there's only drugs, unemployment, and they told me, well, everybody now, all the Palestinians are pouring into Haifa, the young who are coming to universities. So I said, take me there. And then I went to Haifa, and then I started bar hopping, you know, because all these Palestinians have bars and nightclubs and galleries and this and cinemas. And of course, my favorite is drinking, so I was drinking. And I started to drink from one bar to another, and then at 3 o'clock at night, I was completely smashed. I was really but seriously drunk. I never really get drunk. I'm more elegant than that. But I lost my elegance completely. I was like this. And I really wanted to go to sleep, and they told me, no, there's still one bar open. I said, okay, I'll do that. And where is it? And they told me it's just around the corner. It's the Palestinian gay and lesbian bar. I said, we're going. I went and I continued this time, I think maybe another bottle of tequila or something like this, I don't remember, but it was really too much. I went overboard, and these people are the same. In fact, what you saw are the same people. They were just like crazily dancing with the same song. And I was like mesmerized. I said, this is really incredible. They're so like, and then I learned that these are the pacifists, the activists, the anarchists who express themselves festively. They have art expressions, they dance, but they also make films, and they do music, and this is the new non-ideological generation that is really a total menace to Israel and any kind of dictatorship or fascist regime, because they are just so expressing themselves so culturally that you cannot nail them. They are being just who they are, and they are very poetic, and to accuse them of terrorism is not exactly that easy. And this is the time I felt like this is really interesting, you know. These are the people who have some real organic perfect strangers. They identify with their Palestinianism not in terms of geography, not at all. They identify their Palestinian identity by identifying with the world. So they are completely in terms of identifying with all the causes. So they are not at all nationalistic, they don't belong to any party, they are just happy, resistant peoples. I have witnessed this elsewhere, by the way. This is not the only place I've seen this. I've seen this in a lot of my travels. And I think that, unfortunately, to all those who are sitting here who are above 30 years old, I'm sorry, but it's no longer our world, it's theirs.
Well, we open up the conversation to the audience.
Shukran Kathir. I'm very happy to meet you. It's a pleasure. I want you to know my father was the director of UNRWA for the Palestinian refugees. He covered Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Gaza Strip, and I know that whole region. I know Nazareth, I know Haifa, I know Bethlehem. His last posting was in 1970 in Israel, and Benjamin Netanyahu was the liaison officer in those days. So my heart is with you, and I really enjoyed your film. It was very artistic, and my husband is Lebanese. He's sitting there. From Lebanon, and he was born in Portugal. So we moved because of the war. So it's lovely to meet you, Elia Suleiman.
Well, I just have to, since this is not a question, I just have to point out, you can sit down, it's okay, that talk about resistance and revolutions. It's incredible what's happening in Lebanon today, because really the young are taking over. And in fact, my heart is for them. And I just hope that also the Palestinians will start to have some solidarity also with them. I know they do, but they have to show up for it. Because right now, Lebanon is going through, like Iraq, is going through a revolution. And I just, you know, from the point of view of this perfect stranger, I'm hoping that there will be a lot of solidarity with the young generation of the Lebanese who are, you know, fighting a horrible mafiose regime, and in fact Iraq too, for that matter. So my heart is with you.
Another question?
Amount of knowledge. I saw, oh, sorry, thank you. I saw Israeli license plates on the cars. What does it mean for you, all this living together with, I have many friends in Israel and also Palestinians, and this is an amazing world. How it is going there?
This is not really what the film is about at all. So you're asking me a question about the local politics when my film is really not about the local politics. And I'm not at all to raise the question of what solution there is in Israel. I can tell you one thing, cinematically. I have turned my back entirely in this film to Israel. I can tell you that during the 70 so years of Israel's existence, one was trying still to hold the thin thread of any possible communication, not to the governments, of course, but even to the Israeli public. My films are taught in Israel. I have shown a lot in Israel, always with some sense of hope. And now that hope is over. And now it's more coherent for me what I knew already a long time ago. Israel occupied Palestine in 1948. It has no right to exist there. And it is a fascist state since its existence, without any excuse. But we kept on going, thinking that maybe some justice can be readjusted in this place. But then the decades and the decades passed, and the only thing we saw was more bloodbaths, more occupation, more annexation, more racism, more apartheid, more this, more that. And finally, at my mature age, I said to myself, basta. You know, this is a fascist regime since its creation. Thank you. So I turned my back to Israel. So did my film. And if you noticed in the film, it means, Israel means absolutely nothing to me. I turned my back, and my film and I left. And the only reference in this film to Israel was the scene with the woman who's a homage to Ahd al-Tamimi, who the girl was arrested in Israel, just to specify in a kind of reduced dose what this place is about. But as far as I'm concerned, there is more concern to what the world is going through. And Israel is just another little fascist state that I don't even care about anymore. By the way, I refuse to show in Israel. I will never ever show my films in Israel. So this is to terminate any discussion about peace, 2 states, 3 states, 5 states. It no longer exists in my dictionary.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to watch. It's, as always, it's a great pleasure to watch a film by you. I'm just super curious, the last scene with this young people full of hope. They were dancing on this Arabiyun Ana. They were really dancing on that, or that was your addition to the film?
I like when my addition to the film is what's really happened. This way, I don't have to imagine things because I'm very lazy. And it's exactly what I saw. You know, I didn't have to imagine anything. I went into that bar at 3 o'clock at night, and really I was completely smashed, and they were dancing on this particular song. It's a kitsch song. And when I said, during the post-production, when I said, I will use this song, everybody kind of closed their eyes like I've lost my taste. So, but sometimes I lose my taste. I kind of like to lose my taste, in fact. I just found it suitable, you know, for this scene that there's something, but I do that often, you know. I mean, I used Natasha Atlas in Divine Intervention, which was like the same song you saw here. I put a spell on you, but the song of Natasha Atlas is complete kitsch. Sometimes kitsch, it has an invisible support for the visual experience we have. On its own, it might be not so, I mean, you cannot imagine me listening to this music in my house, you know, and taking any political kind of, you know, euphoric sensation from it. It's not really the kind of music I listen to. But it's interesting how kitsch gains momentum in the visual experience. And I have done this in the past, and it just, there is something that kitsch kind of revives itself. And
even a bodily expansion.
Well, not my bodily expansion. We don't talk about my bodily expansion.
That's why people like to dance to this song.
Well, they dance to more complex music, but I think the nostalgia, the melancholy, the remembrance, you know, the fact that this song is very old, so it's part of the humor also sometimes to dig out like one of those kitsch songs from 20 years ago and start to dance to it. I'm sure you have it here, you know, the same thing, and we have that. But visually, it's interesting when it clicks. It doesn't always click, but when it clicks, it's fabulous. So in the beginning, when you start to think to match the song to the image, well, you're slightly ashamed of yourself for your low taste. But then something picks up and you become a little bit more risky and you think, but it works, you know. And so, yes, when people, I told them I want to use this song, they were really turning away from me. They thought I was really gone vulgar. But I think I love it. I mean, I think it's, you know, a great match. But it was there. It was in this. They were actually treating the song the same way I treated it in the image. They were dancing to it with a beat degree, you know, with a sense of humor. So I've added, I have to say, I have to confess, to my propaganda nature, because I'm such a sloganist and a sentimentalist, the V. There was no V, of course, in the real dancing scene at 3 o'clock. Everybody's like drugged or drunk. But I thought Arabiyun ana, I'm an Arab, and then they start to appropriate the slogan, you know, they appropriate the lyrics as a form of political sloganism. So that was my doing. And I wanted to raise the V, to give them a little bit more boost for their resistance. So does that answer your question?
Further questions?
Better be simple. Better be nice. I have to go back and drink. Okay.
Hello.
Yes.
My name is Jose. It's very simple. And I think for me it was more curious. What I once saw in the film was the silence that you have. Is only a message, what kind of silence is that? And is your silence or only the movie?
You call that simple. My family is waiting for me outside. There are about 50 of them. Arabs. You don't want to fuck with Arabs. They're terrible. Well, that's a serious question. I mean, that's like if I were giving a masterclass, that question, as simple as it is like maybe an hour and a half of philosophical discussion. So I'll be a little bit more, how should I say, compact about it. But you know, people. First of all, let's talk about silence, because people people forget that verbal language is just one language. People forget the multiplicity of languages that exist in our life. Sound, image, music, all languages, not just to name a few. I think the problem is, well, if I were to be provocative, I would say, how come they use so much verbal language in cinema? Cinema is a visual experience. How come they abuse the visual experience with so much blah blah? And on top of it, language is already, verbal language, is very abused by consumerism. Most of what you hear of language is information. But that's not what verbal language is about. Remember, verbal language is your poets, the people who actually sang the language and gave it a poetic license and gave it a musical and temporal rhythm. And this is verbal language. But the language that we see in the horror of our globalization today, and with the horror of the neoliberal economies that exist today, and with the multinationals that want to suck our blood in uniform with all the governments that you guys have and we have, is what is making the abuse of verbal language. Verbal language can be beautiful and it can have a spiritual existence, but what has been done to it is an abuse. What you see on the billboard is pornography. It's pornographic verbal language. It's informational, it is deception, it is a numbing experience for you to go to the mall and to consume more products. This is to talk about what happened to language, to verbal language. But silence is language, and it's got its it's got its multiplicity of reading, and somehow it has also a kind of a space for a democratic interpretation. You can fill the blanks as a spectator, as somebody who is hearing that silence, as somebody who is seeing also that silence. Silence is also meditative, and it is maybe menacing also to positions of authority because it does not have a linearity of some sort, as verbal language can be abused, because it gives information so you understand precisely what it's saying. Silence is an open space, and so it's harder for it to be appropriated for consumerist purposes. Silence can be poetic, and also it makes us think of our ephemerality, so it might be scary here and there because it raises many times an existential question of who we are and where we're going. It reminds us that we are passing, and silence is full of sound, so it has its own musicality. So this is partially silence, but I'm the only person who was silent. There was tons of sound in the film. I work so hard on sound in the post-production. I have, I consume all the tracks in the auditorium. What you hear here is like an endless combination of sounds in order to give you the sense of silence, actually, which I insist on because I think I like the spectator to actually participate in the making of the film. I don't like when I am just imposing myself on the spectator. I like to leave the frame wide and with the possibilities of reading it in multiplicity of ways. So this feeling that I have is that there is a good chance that you might even come back to see the film, even not the actual film, but to see it in your own associative memory. Even if you forget the film, it might hopefully pop up in some kind of remembrance in another facet in your life. And that can be, in your own associations. So years from now, if it sort of springs as a memory of another memory of something that is connected to the film without immediate relationship, this is how I am gratified. In the same way that I mentioned earlier, if you leave now the auditorium when it's too late, you cannot go to restaurants, they're shut down. But if you leave and your only sense is just hunger, I'm happy. This gratifies me. If you feel like you want to just eat and enjoy and have a pleasure, an instinctive pleasure, this is gratifying. It doesn't have to be, always an analytical, what happened to Palestine, what happened to Israel, or what's happening to the world. This comes later. But desire, the pleasure of the present tense, has the capacity to be an initiator of a lot of layers of politicization. So I'm not mobilizing, but I feel like pleasure can have its own soul. It can spread, and it can by de facto reduce violence. It can by de facto make us closer. And silence is one of those tools that, it's not a tool, it's a wrong word. It's one of those expressions, it's one of those languages that can bring us to this meditative moment where we can have, I want to say something else, I just remembered something. Most of the time we are actually not speaking. We spend our time, not all the time talking, we are spending a lot of time silent. So why speak? When 3/4 of the day you are cooking, you are walking, you are thinking, you are daydreaming, you are missing someone, you are longing for something. And all of that does not happen by saying, oh, I miss somebody. It happens in the interiority of yourself, and it happens in silence. So for me, silence is not a stranger at all. It's noise that is really an aggression. And there's so much of it around us. So much of it. I'm fine.
One more question, or should...
Thank you for the movie, it was great. I loved it. It reminded me about Istanbul more than 25 years ago when I lived there, and I enjoyed those type of dancing a lot. I have one question, which is how did we work with that bird? With the bird.
The bird. The bird chirped and then tuk, jumped on the computer. First time I said, okay, you know, you like to play, you're a baby, you're a nice little baby bird, fine, but I got some work to do, so please can you fucking, you know, drink your fucking water and let me do what I have to do. But then the bird started to occupy me. And I looked at the bird and I knew that there was something interesting about the bird, and I wrote the scene in. The rest of the story of the bird is horrific, because my wife, we started to take the bird to the park so that it eat ants. That's in Paris, I'm saying. Look what you do in Paris, you take a bird to eat ants. It's not like you go to some restaurant, no. You start to look for the fucking ants in the park. And this is what happened to me, a total loser. And so I said, okay, we took the bird, we searched, and then she went with it to some bird doctor. Oh, the story is really hallucinatory. And the doctor says, no, you don't take the bird to eat, you have to buy worms for the bird to eat, because she started to research how can we make the bird survive. And there was a lot of phone calls, by the way, to a lot of French institutions who say, well, oui, bonjour. They give you information, and they take it seriously, by the way. So, and she at the same time was looking for an orphanage for the bird. But all the orphanages were telling my wife that, sorry, the orphanages are full. Plus, the bird was not so special, as you saw. It was the same kind of bird. It's not like, wow, it's so exotic, let's do something with it. It's just another one, there's millions of them. And then one day I opened the fridge, because I'm a cook, I'm not really a filmmaker, I'm more of a cook. And so all what I do in my life is just cook. And I open the fridge and I see what in the fridge? I see worms. Worms in a plastic container in the fridge, and they were moving. They still didn't freeze yet. They were still alive. And I'm like disgusted. So comes my wife and I tell her, because she's a singer, she's a composer, she's all over the place. So I'm the guy who's like the housewife. And so I tell her simply, I said, it's either me or the bird. I think she thought about it. But then she decides we have to do something about the bird. So take out the worms, do something about the bird. A friend of hers was leaving to Lebanon. So she asked that friend if he would mind to take the bird to Lebanon. She's Lebanese. The friend says, sure, I'll take the bird to Lebanon. She phones Air France. What do? I want to send this bird to Lebanon. Air France tell her, well, you cannot send it to Lebanon, you have to have a passport. I'm serious. She does a passport for the bird. I don't even have the same passport like the bird, so the bird has a passport. And now it can go to Lebanon. Flies to Lebanon. And in the beginning, the friend puts the bird in the house and the bird is happy, and suddenly another bird enters the house, and there was like a kind of companionship and friendship between this bird and another bird, so life was happy. Except for a couple of weeks later, the bird and its companion escape, they leave to have freedom, normal, and all that, and then Israel attacks Lebanon. We don't know where the bird is at the moment. If it's a martyr or not, we have no idea. We have not heard from the bird. Personally, I mean, in solidarity of the bird, but I'm happy it went to Lebanon, I have to say. I couldn't live with a bird in a house. So, but this is the story of the bird. And the rest is just imagination. The old typewriter stuff is just a gag. And thank you very much.